Welcome to the LinkUp podcast. I am your host, Chris. This is a special episode. We have with us in studio a member from the CPR group, Michelle Lockwood. Welcome.
Thank you.
I know this is a time for the community right now in the elections where everyone is deciding on if you're a red team, teal team, purple team. I think at the end of the day, no matter who you're voting for, or independent, sorry, not to undermine the independence there, but no matter which team you're on, I think ultimately we all want what's best for Cayman. And how we get there maybe is what we row about. And one of the topics that we're rowing about happens to be this cruise berthing facility saga that has been ongoing for quite so many years now.
Yep.
So I just wanted to get some background into you and how you got involved into becoming a defender of the coral and ting.
And ting. So 5 years ago, there was a report in the CNS, Cayman News Service, and they said that all of the vendors in the Royal Watler Terminal had their contracts had been terminated and that they were going to be building a new port. And it then turned out that the PPM government, which was the government at the time, said, hey, that's fake news. No, we're not building a port. We haven't signed any contracts. But it spawned our group getting together and sort of saying, no, there's a lot to think about, a lot that's not okay with this. And CPR kind of came together from some individuals from the original Save Cayman, which was very environmental focused. So like you said, the coral and ting, and
that was an iconic line.
Yeah,
I
mash up the coral and ting.
Yeah, I love that line so much. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I actually kind of want to get that audio clip. I can't find it, so it's so far back in the Instagram archives. But I'll go hunting one day for it.
Yeah. So it's just a group, like I said, the marine environmental people that were concerned activists, and then it was other people that were hey, there's actually a lot of other reasons to be concerned about this cruise berthing facility that don't include the environment, like how much is this going to cost us, what is this going to mean for us, for our infrastructure, what is this going to mean for us socially. And so that's what kind of spawned CPR Cayman.
And how many of you was it that formed the initial group?
That was 5 of us in someone's living room on a August 2018 evening. and we that was when we came up with CPR Cayman. And then that was also when we launched our People's Initiated referendum. So that's when we started collecting signatures.
So you were going out to sites?
We were at Hurley's pretty much every evening, every weekend, collecting signatures, everywhere we could be, just trying to get
Did you
out.
get anybody come up to your table and being like, you guys wasting your time, you shouldn't be doing this?
I definitely, there's a lot of stories that some people could tell you, but I don't really have any of them. I wasn't at the table as often as I probably should have been. But I've definitely been told lots of different things from different people. Friends of mine, I have family that won't speak to me now because of my stance on cruise berthing.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys collected the signatures. You went through the approval process of getting them verified.
Yeah.
You handed them in.
So we handed them in June. So we started in August. We had enough by June 2019.
And for people that don't know, you need 25% of the voting
total electorate.
Yeah.
So at the time, that was I think the number equated to 5,260 something is what we needed. I think we gave 6,000 signatures. So that was 25% at the time. The number of voters has increased since then. So. And
the referendum was due to take place.
So we handed it in June, and then the government at the time said, "Oh wait, hang on a second. We need to verify all of these signatures." So they then took from June to September to verify them. That was the process of going to each person and saying, "Did you sign this?" And so that then got verified on September 2019, and then we had the referendum law, the People's Initiated referendum law, which stated that the question was, should the Cayman Islands continue to develop cruise berthing facility and cargo facility?
Who framed the question?
The government gets to frame the question.
Okay.
So our question on our petition said, should the matter of the cruise birthing facility, a matter of national importance, be decided solely by referendum? We didn't talk about
But
cargo.
then it was conflated with
But
cargo
then they
afterwards.
conflated cargo after, which is so. When that happened, we then Shirley, who unfortunately couldn't come today, then very bravely stood up and said, "This isn't going to work. We're going to have to go to court." So, like, her name is on all of the petitions, right, for the judicial review. So she then went to judicial review to say, hey, you're conflating two things. The other thing that we were concerned about was because of when they had proposed to do the vote, it was December 19th, right, which was like a Thursday, like the Thursday before Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, they were setting us up for failure because they knew everybody was going to be like, oh, you know what, I'm
On
checked
vacation,
out, I'm
not
ready to
here,
go,
right.
you know, so they were setting us up for failure. And then it disenfranchised, I think, like 200 odd voters that had signed up
That had
because you know how the
registered.
whole registration thing works.
It's delayed by like
that it
3 months or 4
yeah,
months.
3 to
something like
6 months, depending on what time you put your name down. So it meant that there's, you know, 200 people, I think, that were due to be on the register 1st of January that in 2020 that wouldn't have been able to vote in it. So Shirley took it to judicial review, which we then had the case in January 2020. We won on the first instance, or Shirley won on the first instance. That was January 2020. I'm sure you know what happens next.
that. Yeah.
So then shortly after that, then we have the pandemic, and the government then did take it to the Court of Appeal. They did win on Court of Appeal, but
What did the win mean?
well, it meant that, like, you know, if they were going to go back to the vote, then, you know, they got the question. The question was going to be how they had proposed it. And, you know, some of the other stuff kind of became a non-issue because it had gotten delayed because of the judicial review. Those people that were on the register were then on the register.
Do they also
So-
have the option of choosing how it is determined to have been a success in terms
Yeah,
of
so
50% plus one?
That's governed by the Constitution.
Okay.
So the Constitution, there's two sections that deal with referendums. One is government-initiated referendums, and one is people-initiated referendums. So people-initiated is Section 70, and that's when you got 25% plus one. 25% to initiate it.
And
but then
50%.
and then you get, once you go to the vote, then it's 50% plus one person of the total electorate. So if people don't show up, then they were going to count as a yes vote.
Right.
But
That's what happened to us during one man vote.
Yeah, exactly. But now with this one that's happening now, this is a government-initiated referendum. So with the people's initiated, that would be binding. Whatever result came out of
And that was yours.
that was ours. People's
Yes,
initiated.
I remember.
Yeah, it would.
Well, we had the
binding.
signatures back then, and then at the time, the premier McKeeva didn't. When they found out, I think CNS made an article stating that the 25% had been hit, and then shortly after that, McKeeva then kind of took the bull by the horns and said, well, the government's going to initiate a referendum on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And,
that's that changes it, right? Because people's initiated would have been binding for you,
Yeah.
as would ours if ours had gone ahead. So this one now is a government initiated referendum, and the government gets to set the question. Well, they got to set the question in both instances, but the other thing with this is it's now non-binding, but the threshold is a little bit better. So it's 50% plus one person of who shows up to vote, which is a big difference.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I think the last I heard, it was like 70 to 72% of our electorate turn out to vote.
Right.
So if we had a people's initiated one, it would have straight up off the bat been 30%, like technically a yes vote, because
Correct.
they would have, So with the government initiated one,
It's quite a threshold.
It's a little bit different, but it is non-binding, which means, and it's also very interesting that this is all happening with the elections, which is better in some ways because I think more people will show up because it's also an election. But on the other hand, it also means that there's going to be a whole new government in come May 1st. We don't know what kind of government it's going to look like, but they could very easily decide that they don't want to listen to whatever the vote is.
So-
That being said, I still am strongly encouraging you to go out and vote no, because we just have to show them what the mandate should be.
So there was a fun fact about your referendum, that it was the first of its kind in all UK territories.
Yeah, I think that's true. Probably one man, one vote probably would have been.
It would have been,
yeah.
but it got taken over.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that is, yeah.
So you guys get to the referendum, and then it gets pulled.
Well, COVID happened, a lot of
Yeah.
things happened,
Yeah.
and then, at the time,
I remember during COVID, the question kept popping up.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? What are you going to
Yeah.
do? What are you going to do? Pressure was on, and I
Yeah.
think the government kind of like
Well, I think as well too,
waved the white flag.
the then premier said that he was like, well, the deal that was on the table is no longer on the table, and he was sort of making the argument that our referendum was specifically for that proposal.
Right.
Whereas I would say it wasn't, because we never knew what proposal it was when we started our petition, because we started in 2018. The approved proposal didn't get approved until July 2019. So I don't know what he meant by that, but for all intents and purposes, there was no longer the Verdant Isle deal on the table in May 2020. And then, in fairness to any government, I don't think any of them had the time or capacity trying to deal with everything from COVID to try and bring on a referendum at that time.
I just wanted to clarify, just for some of our younger listeners who may not know, but a referendum that is binding and non-binding. Do you want to help clarify that for them?
Well, binding means that the government has to listen to whatever the result is. So if it is a no vote, then that means that they can't. I don't know for how long, because presumably
in perpetuity.
You would
assume.
I don't know, right?
It's not
like if say we had something like, we have the gambling one, which might be a little bit easier one, the national lottery. If that's a no vote, that means that they can't do anything with it, right? If it's non-binding, it means that they can look at it as guidance, but ultimately they can still make the decision themselves, and they can say, no, we believe it's in the best interest of the country to have a lottery, so we're going to do it regardless of what, because it's a non-binding. So it's quite different, right? Having the non-binding
Absolutely.
and having the binding.
Absolutely, because the government could kind of use it in their favor, because if the vote goes their way, they'd be like, well, we're going to go with what people say. If the vote doesn't go their way, it'd be like, well, it's non-binding.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very, very, I've heard that the PPM said that they're going to honor whatever the referendum says.
Okay.
I think CINP has said that it's not a top priority for them, because they polled some of their constituents, and it's not even a top 10 issue for their
Any referendum item?
No, this particular cruise birthing one.
The birth,
I actually don't know if that would be cruise birthing in particular. I know CINP said that they're not going to. It's not a top 10 issue, I think, for them.
So now that we arrived to today, and we've had an interesting, I guess, course of how we got to these referendum questions, but they're here. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 of them: one for gambling, one for marijuana decriminalization, and one for the cruise birthing. And the cruise birthing is quite vague, because
it's very vague.
You're not voting on a plan, you're voting on an idea.
And this idea could take place anywhere in all 3 islands. Right. So it's hugely vague. And then, the other thing, just to say this, because there's a lot of signs now, I'm sure you've all seen it, is that there's a lot of vote yes to save cruise tourism signs, which is actually quite unfair, because just because you vote no to cruise birthing doesn't mean that you don't also want to save cruise tourism.
Right.
But we've gone out and asked the elections office supervisor, Wesley Howell, is there any recourse for us, because these are misleading signs? And unfortunately, this is why we were asking. So we were saying it from 2020, saying it for 2019. There needs to be a standalone referendum law that guides all referendums. Those 2 sections that I told you in the Constitution, that's the only thing that guides referendums. Right. So there's nothing to stop people from saying misleading things, both in the elections context and in these these particular issues. So yeah, like you said, cruise birthing, like, it's very, very vague. There's no plan, no proposal, no facts on the economy of it, like how much is it going to cost? No facts on what exactly does it entail? Does it entail 1 pier, 2 piers, 3 piers?
Right.
Where?
Absolutely.
So it's like there's a lot of things that are being said, and I've heard some of the pro-pier proponents saying, oh, it's going to be on pylons. How do you know that? Nobody knows that, because there is no plan. All we can base what we've been saying on is what was happening in 2019 and the plan that had been put in place then. But realistically, I think should it go that we are going to do cruise birthing, I imagine that they're probably going to pick up that plan again.
That same plan. So,
I don't know, but
yeah. Where did the idea of that cruise tourism is dying and that the pier will fix it. What is the data around that
Well-
that the government or people that are in the ACT, I think it's called, that their hypothesis is that the two are interlinked?
You see, I don't really know what the data is on that. Like I think a lot of things have happened since 2020. We've had COVID, right? COVID has like had a massive effect on tourism in general globally. All tourism fell. Now it's taken a little bit longer. Remember, the government took a really strong approach in that they didn't want to reopen. It took them till like end of 2021 before they started reopening like
Right.
like more fully, not just with the 10-day quarantine. So we took longer than most jurisdictions to open up. So we've consequently taken a little bit more time to probably rebound from some of that. We're now talking about some of the strongest numbers that we've had since 2019 in both stayover and cruise tourism.
And regionally?
No, in the Cayman Islands.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
I think February, was like on record for like cruise tourism. And I think January for stayover was like the second highest January that we've had since we were at our height in tourism. So I think some things have been conflated, that COVID happened, decline happened in tourism. Now I think it's kind of being eschewed that, oh, that's because we don't have piers. But actually, if you read some of the reports that, we were talking about this earlier, but Marla, we actually have one of the highest disembarkation rates.
Marla
Dukharan.
And she is?
She is she's an economist, a regional economist from Trinidad. She's done lots of reports. She did one for the Cayman Islands government for the beach erosion, I think last year.
She's very well respected.
She's very well respected. I think right now she's in Fiji or something. She's going all over the place, representing, and, her stuff is very, very well respected.
I saw that she made mention that mega ships are not exactly getting the numbers up for the so people that build piers for mega ships do not necessarily have an increase in the amount of tourists that come to visit them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that she said in her report is that, so one of these arguments that I think I've heard, right, just to kind of go back to what your original question was, is okay, well, cruise berthing is because we don't have cruise berthing, that's why we have a decline. But that information is just purely coming from that the cruise lines are saying we're not tendering our mega ships, right? But from Marla's report, she's saying that actually only 11% of the ships currently planned for build in the next 10 to 15 years are their passenger capacity is 5,500 or more. Most of them
for the next 10 to 15 years. So it will not be the majority of cruise ships that are
actually the majority.
Ships.
Yeah. So I think she divides it into three. So I think it's up to 2,000, and then 2,000 to 5,000, and then the 5,000 and over. And there's only 11% of those ships are being built at the 5,000.
I noticed capacity. She did say that Disney in particular was leaning more towards doing mid-size ships.
Yeah, they are.
In the future.
They are.
And not mega ships.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you now, the idea that the cruise spend is so necessary into keeping Georgetown alive,
mm-hmm.
and there have been, I think it has to be. There's no actual firm data on it, but it's anecdotal evidence that because the cruise numbers have dipped, businesses in Georgetown have closed.
Yeah, and you see that because I've heard it touted that there's 40 businesses that have closed. But what was town like before COVID, right? Town is built out of, jewelry shops, restaurants that cater only towards cruise tourism, all businesses in terms of more like financial services and all that sort of stuff. They're moving out of town now. But what does that leave? Right? That doesn't leave much. So when the cruise ships are gone, they're gone. How many businesses were already leaving Georgetown before COVID? Right?
I will say before COVID, even over the past 20 years, when town had more restaurants,
mm-hmm.
They had the little Foster's on the corner by Butterfield, all of those places left. So Senior Frog's gone,
yeah.
Margaritaville gone. There was a place in the Jack and Jill building, a restaurant called Bacchus. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember Bacchus.
That's out of there. The little food court that we had that turned into a wonderful jewelry store on Cardinal Avenue.
Yeah, that was such a great little place.
That's gone.
Yeah.
So
so exactly. So if we look back long enough, same thing with like
businesses have been
but also if you look all over, like look in Camana Bay, there's tons of businesses that have come and gone in Camana Bay.
Absolutely.
And that's like has probably a guarantee of business in terms of like the,
So I guess the only way to know is for people to say, or I guess the people who own the businesses to have done like a survey to say if they believe that the numbers decreased because of cruise tourism, or was it just, you just didn't run a good business?
Yeah, I mean, well, I know. So I saw the list that has been set out, saying the 40 businesses. 3 of them, I think I could pretty confidently talk to in terms of there was Blue Wave Clothing. I don't know if you know that one. That was like behind the museum.
Yeah.
Underneath
It's right at the end of Shedden Road.
Yeah, exactly.
The very, very end of Shedden Road.
And she sold like surf stuff, like Billabong, Rip Curl, like those kinds of brands, right? I used to go in there all the time. I hardly ever saw cruise tourism in there, right?
Tourists aren't coming here to buy things, they'd buy them all.
Exactly.
You're not going to buy a Billabong shorts in Cayman.
Exactly.
Unless you maybe forgot one or something. But yeah, you're not.
Yeah, but realistically, if you were just going to, if you had to buy a shirt, you're probably going to buy one that says something Cayman Islands on it, right? So I don't know exactly. I can't speak exactly to why she left, but she didn't close down. She moved her business out of town, and she's in one of the, the pink or the blue plaza. I can't remember which one. I think it's the...
I'm pretty sure it's a blue one.
She's got Waterman in the blue one.
Okay,
but I think she's moved. Like Blue Wave itself into the pink one.
Okay.
Past Chicken.
Okay.
So it's not. It hasn't closed down. It's not. It didn't die. That business is still thriving in a different location because she wasn't relying on cruise tourism. So she moved out of town. Bread and Chocolate was one that was touted, and I was such a frequenter of Bread and Chocolate, and I went there the last day that he was open, and he was like, this revitalization killed us. People can't get to us. He never ever had cruise tourists in there. He had all the people from the court's office. He had local people that were in town, working in businesses there. I never saw cruise tourists there. Hardly, if I did.
You think the revitalization
revitalization
project hurt them?
Hurt them for sure. Same thing with Daily Grind. Because remember, they're right on that little corner. And remember that whole road for 6 months or something was completely inaccessible because of the revitalization. So that's 100% what happened to Bread and Chocolate. Bluestone Lane, I heard that the franchise itself decided that they didn't want to be in the Caribbean anymore. I don't know. I haven't spoken to anybody on that one. But I do think that, this is something that we have to talk to these people. What did happen?
So just making the assumption.
We're making a lot of assumptions with these 40 businesses.
Right. Those are some pretty serious assumptions to make if you're going to do this kind of expenditure.
Yeah. And and I think that's one of the things in Marla's report too, that she said, she's like, there's just no data for this. And she's like, if this is happening, then the ESO should be going out and interviewing these businesses and talking to them and seeing what happened. And like you said, it might be that there's actually a lot more to it than just a decline in cruise numbers.
So Miss Marla had some interesting stats in her report. One of them to me was once the cruise spend versus the overnight spend. And she made the observation that we've negotiated, she believes we negotiated poorly on behalf of our operators, where the percentages that they're getting from the cruise lines are horrendous.
40% compared to what the cruise line.
So the average spend for a tour operator on a cruise line was $47 versus a range of 75 to $125 for attractions like Stingray City, the Caves, dolphin encounters. What was another one there? I don't remember. But so that was one thing. So I guess suggesting that that the people are suffering because the cruise tourism is dying, you can negotiate better deals so people could have better wages. The other thing that I saw that she mentioned, which was probably one of the most interesting points to us, which came to a systemic problem with our education,
Yeah.
was that why are we going to create more jobs in a sector that facilitate the lowest paying jobs?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we do have people that are coming out the system now that would only be able to work in those jobs, but we shouldn't be facilitating that forever. We should be really gearing people up towards having the higher paying jobs.
Yeah.
I really thought, I mean, there's obviously a lot more to expound upon that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing. And I think that that's a big point that this whole election is having to go around, is sort of the opportunities that are not being afforded to Caymanians that allow expats to come here and then feel a little too comfortable sometimes. You know, I know we all have heard the like riffraff story. We've all heard some of these stories that have been coming out, right? Like, and now look, I'm half Caymanian, half expat, right? My father was from the UK, my mother's Caymanian, as it goes back, right? So don't believe that I'm like anti-expat, but I think we have to be facilitating our children to come up and to be as well educated and to take any job that they want in the Cayman Islands, right? We shouldn't be just saying, oh, well, we have done you the worst disservice. Here's the lowest paying job. We need to like have more respect for our people than to just sort of say, oh, you can only do this now.
Well, education, I've never envied the education minister, because it is
or any teacher, to
any
be honest
teacher.
with you, yeah.
But the minister, it's pretty thankless because you only have 4 years, and you're never going to see the level of change that you probably implement in those 4 years. So it's a very tough position to be in, and I don't envy the job of trying to change a whole nation's education.
Mm-hmm.
But
but it is one that we could start putting a little bit more money towards it instead of to cruise birthing.
Well, I would think so. So speaking of money for cruise birthing, what are the ideas of how the funding is going to be for that, especially now that we already have huge capital expenditure projects that have put us into a 20-something million dollar deficit?
So I think I said this to you before we started recording, but you know, like there is no real, we don't really know what's going to happen with this. Should we get a yes, we want cruise birthing? As far as I know, it's basically going to be, we have to start from scratch. Although there was a plan and there was a project, 5 years ago, 2019, 2020, that was going to cost, I think it was 200 million CI. That was 5 years ago, right? So with inflation, I'm sure that number is going to go up. And any project that has ever been estimated has always come out, any of our capital works projects has always come out probably double what they.
I kind of feel it's a dangerous time to take on such a.
Well, we're potentially in this new government's inheriting a deficit, right?
Well, they're in a deficit, but not only that, but taking on such a large capital expenditure project during this potential tariff war that's going on. You never know. The cost could be X one day, and then by the way things are kind of going, they could just double the next day. I don't think the confidence.
That's a good point. Like, 3 weeks ago when I first started talking, well, even 3 months ago when I talked about this, we didn't have a tariff war going on. Now we do. Like
30% on my eggs may not feel nice, but that's only a couple bucks. 30% on hundreds of millions of dollars.
And billions. On construction materials.
That's
a much different thing. And don't forget, that's going to hurt. This project is going to be in the sea, which we haven't really undertaken that kind of like capital works project in the marine environment.
Was there ever an EIA done for that construction of those piers?
Yeah, so there's an EIA. It's like often referred to as the Baird Report in 2015. That started, I think, because that was 2015. So that was a different project. It was the basis that was going to be taken for the 2019 project. So that Verdant Isle won that, and that was a conglomerate of, I think, McAlpine were one of the construction businesses on the island, and Royal Caribbean and Carnival. So that's what Verdant Isle is when I say that. They basically took the EIA, the 2015 EIA, and they were like, oh, we'll just enhance on this. So this is what I'm saying, $200 million. Like, it's quite significant difference now with all of the things we just said. But there is one. One of the things I will say is that, I think they undertook it for like a year maybe, but I did speak to different people that said that they were quite concerned that they hadn't really done a lot of analysis on like what it was going to be like to do the dredging. And they did, because they didn't have the equipment or the time to do it, right? So some people are like, oh, we're going to put pylons on. We have no clue if that's going to work, right?
And there was also concern about the level of coral that they would have to remove.
Well, it's 12, I think it was 12 to 15 acres of coral that would have to be removed.
And they claimed that the coral was dead already at the time.
They did. And like, look, I'm not going to lie that all the coral is like thriving, but it's still one of the most heavily dived and snorkeled places in the Cayman Islands, right? That's not for nothing. There is 100% stuff there. And even if, like, it's also where like lots of fish and conch and lobsters start off, like that's their nursery, like where they start off, so all this stuff that we enjoy just from a like, very Caymanian fishing perspective, like that's where a lot of it like lives and grows. And there's reasons why when you hear conch and lobster season that they don't allow you to take them from the marine parks. It's because that's where they need to start off to have, to grow bigger so that they can then move into other places where you can fish them.
So the impact, I guess, before the concern was about the actual numbers, I remember the initial arguments when we were in 2019 into 2020 were mainly about what's going to happen to 7 Mile Beach.
Yeah, that looks what happened to 7 Mile Beach. The report did say that it wasn't going to affect 7 Mile Beach. I do think that there is more to that story in terms of, I think that there was more studies that needed to be done for them to fully be able to say that conclusively. And the other thing I should say with EIAs is they are paid for by the developer, right? So at the end of the day, your client is the developer. So you're going to write the report in a way that works for the developer. You're not going to write it in a way that's actually probably like best practice for what's best for the country. You're going to write it because the developer has to pay for it and the developer is the client. And they're going to say, but I need you to say it this so that I can do this project.
So one of the things that I guess I thought about was, okay, let's say mega ships are in Cayman, right? Are we going to have like 4 mega ships lined off? That's, I don't know, that's almost like 20,000 people, 20, more than 20,000 people. Maybe there's a couple more ships that are anchored off too. Are we able to facilitate that amount of people?
I mean, I don't believe so at all. Like,
and by facilitate, I mean not only just moving the people, but getting them to the destinations of the attractions, and those attractions having the quality of experience.
Exactly. I mean, what I was going to say before you said that is that, look, when you come off the ship, right, you need more than just to be able to walk on a sidewalk. You need to be able to walk on a handicap accessible sidewalk. The amount of times that I've seen handicap like wheelchairs or people in those
scooters,
those little scooters on the road because our sidewalks aren't adequate. That's a massive problem, right? Do we have enough bathroom facilities? No. Absolutely not.
I don't even know where the public bathrooms are.
There's no public bathrooms. I think that there is on the port, like on the Royal Watlow terminal. Yeah. But after you move from there, where do you go? Like I went to my hairdresser the other day, and there was like, I don't know how many people walk by looking for public restrooms, and none of these buildings have public restrooms. So simple things like that we're failing our tourists with, right? So do we have the capacity to handle it? No. Look at how bad the traffic is on a cruise ship day, right? So you've got all the businesses moving through it, all the people, all the food deliveries happening now, all the people actually having to go out to do whatever errands that they have to do on their lunch hour. Then you include that tour buses, and then you include tourists walking anywhere across the street because they don't use the sidewalks. Are we really thriving as a destination? Probably not.
And have the tour operators themselves been complaining that they are not that they are hurting in terms of are their profits declining sharply?
I've heard people say that. I don't know exactly, because unless somebody shows you their books, I don't know how you can really measure any of that, because somebody could say that all the time, like, oh, I haven't had X amount, but that's different than actually looking at like financials of a business. I mean, Shirley probably would have been a better one to ask some of these questions too, because she is in the cruise tourism operation.
One of the stats that that I heard Miss Marla mention, which was very intriguing to me, is centered around the question of why is it that the cruise numbers are declining? And one of the things that she pulled up was this 2 to 4 day itinerary, which was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to, I guess, explain? You probably know better than I do.
Well, I mean, so basically, a lot of these ships have now done 2 to 4 day itineraries, so that you can just basically probably do like either an excursion over a weekend, or take a Friday off, take a Monday off, and you get a nice little holiday. But because of where Cayman is situated, we are outside of that, right? So that
geographically,
right.
Because
of where we're situated. So that 2 to 4 day is like them leaving, one of the ports in Florida, getting to us, and then also getting back within 2 to 4 days.
So they're probably going Bahamas, Turks, Caicos.
Yeah, or Key West. I think like she said that Key West is like thriving right now. And I think a lot of these larger ships are doing those kind of holidays. They're just like doing, and then remember, the Bahamas has loads of islands that are being leased by the cruise lines themselves. So when you say it's going to the Bahamas, it might not even really be truly going to the Bahamas. It might be going to one of those islands. One of those private islands, right? And I think, and these ships, these big ships that we're talking about that won't tender here, they are massive. They've got like, probably 6 pools, and that's probably even an underestimation. They've got massive amounts of things. They got zip lines, they got theme parks, they got casinos, they've got all of this stuff on board. If I was on that ship, I'd be like, you know what? Let's do a 2-week jaunt somewhere, but let's just do it across the Atlantic. I don't care about going anywhere. I'll just spend a different night at a different place in the cruise ship. I'm not going to get out.
So the evidence about the shift of quality versus quantity, I heard mentioned as well.
Yeah.
And I think is the idea that should we adopt that philosophy as well?
Well, in a lot of ways, we've already started to adopt that philosophy. And that is what CPR has always maintained. Like I said earlier about the misleading signs, vote yes to save cruise tourism. We are not trying to say don't save cruise tourism. We're just saying that there are other ways to solve that problem that don't include destroying our marine life, that don't include us, spending, exorbitant amounts of money that we're not sure that we can be able to afford to pay right now, that won't have the same social impacts. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought now.
Well, I think a lot of the stats that Ms. Marla showed that we're still leading the Caribbean.
Oh, yeah, quality. So, sorry, I didn't remember what I was going to say. So, yes, you're absolutely right. And actually, I'm going to take this one out because this is the economic impact of the cruise tourism in the Cayman Islands. So this is the ESO. This is our own report, and this is the same report.
It's done by our people then?
Yeah, this is our people. And this is the same report that Marla actually refers to in her report, because she didn't make up her data. She didn't go and do her own. She went and found our reports, and she analyzed that data, right? But there is a stat in here where it shows what the cruise lines have been doing before and after COVID. And it's actually, we were already starting to do the quality over quantity tourism. It's not the best graphic in the world, and I don't know how easy you'll be able to see it on there. But yeah, the two full years before COVID, Carnival Cruise Lines was 40%. After the first 2 full years after COVID, it's down to like 29.1%. But Celebrity, right? So Carnival and Royal Caribbean are considered like mass tourism.
That's the budget.
Those are the more budget ones.
We know.
Yeah.
You take one walk through town on a certain day, you know what ship is in.
Yeah. So Royal Caribbean Cruises was at 13% 2 years before COVID. And then after COVID, 2 years after COVID, they were at 11%, right? So they both come down, those ones, but those are mass. Now the more like mid-range, sort of more luxury, and so that's Disney, Celebrity, and Disney went from 6% before COVID to 11.7% after COVID. So we've already gotten an increase from Disney, which is more of the kind of quality ship that we want to get. Celebrity went from 6.8 to 16.1.
That's huge.
Yeah.
10% jump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're already seeing this jump. And like, we're not even talking about the ones like, I don't know why we haven't gotten Virgin Voyages. Because that's a kind of newer, more luxury line, you know, by Richard Branson.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know why we haven't gotten that one, why we haven't tried to attract that one. But the other one, and I know that the manager at the Ritz here has been talking about, is it getting the Ritz cruise line here. And I think it might have even come once. I could be wrong. But I know that there was talks about that, right? So we can do this with luxury. If you think about like mass tourism and luxury tourism, it's like being on a bus or being on in a private car, right? Who's probably going to give you more money?
Yeah.
And you only have to deal with one person.
Absolutely.
You know, like you only have to be nice to one person, and you can probably get as much money as you would if you had like a bus of 30 people.
So getting that quality does mean a lot. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, God, this might sound bad. Anyway, here we go. Let's jump off the deep end. If we had, 5 Carnival ships in, what is the purported average spend going to be versus if we had, the other ones? I think the sense is going to be found there.
Yeah.
That the quality is probably the best way to go. I mean, I'm no economist, I'm no expert, but just from my own, putting two tools together, I would think that would be kind of the advantageous way to pursue that. What else? What other data points did I have? Oh, we never did touch on the costs. Well, I brought it up, but we didn't get into it.
The cost of what it was in 2019?
No, where they were going to get the money from to pay for this thing.
Well, in 2019, the whole sort of sparkly deal that was being touted was, the cruise lines are going to pay for it. Verdant Isle is going to pay for it. But we were going to pay that back over 25 years, right? So they kept saying, oh, no, we're not paying for it. We're not paying for it. They're paying. But who pays for something like that?
Just out of the goodness of their heart,
without wanting something in return.
Right.
So we were going to be paying that back because I forget what the head tax is now, but we get a per passenger head tax. That was basically going to go towards the paying back whatever pier was built in 2019.
There was also a stat talking about the government revenue from the tourism industry on a whole, that the head tax. It was a very small percentage, so it wasn't going to be any big revelation in terms of the government coffers.
Yeah,
we weren't going to get some like 5, 10, 20% jump in revenue or anything like that.
Yeah.
So the expenditure rumors that I heard, or where the money was going to come from, was some people were talking about the pension.
I've heard that too, because I think I want to say that the Minister of Tourism made that suggestion.
So that we dip into the pension reserves.
I think.
I don't know if that's completely true or not.
Yeah, I don't really want to maybe I should be careful what I say, because I don't. But I have heard that. I have also heard that. And I have heard that it was like,
So we can say we don't know if it's true.
We don't know if it's true, but I have
around.
heard that. I mean, I can say this for certain. I know because CPR had a meeting when the sort of whole thing about this government-initiated referendum started last year, August. CPR did have a meeting with the Minister of Tourism and the then Deputy Premier, Andre Ebanks. And, when we had that conversation with the minister, he said, look, I want to invest in this. And he said, I want this to be Caymanian owned. That was what I got from him. He said, I have seen what happens. I think we need cruise berthing. And he said, but I want this to be a deal for the Caymanian people. And so I think that's sort of where some of this has come from, is that maybe the pension can fund it. And then it's a Caymanian owned business.
Have you reached out or spoke to any people in neighboring or countries in the region that have had cruise pairs where, their opinions may?
I haven't personally. I am in a group on Facebook that is against cruise lines, and they put a lot of different things about different jurisdictions that are having trouble with cruise lines. But to your point of what you're asking, Jamaica, Falmouth is a great example of a place where they built piers and the cruise lines never came. And they're not reaping any of the rewards.
They never came.
They never, yeah. They even built, I think, a new, I don't know what you call it, the facility, like, where they would actually take off from. So like a home port.
Okay.
They built one, I think, in Mobile, Alabama, and they don't go from there at all, because again, if you're thinking that they're focusing on 2 to 4 day cruises, if you're going from Mobile, Alabama, it's like
takes day and a half just to get to,
just to get to like the tip of Florida, so that's another port in their own country that really didn't reap any benefits. But there's lots. I mean, Marla's report has a lot of that kind of stuff too about other jurisdictions that do have cruise berthing that are still on the decline, because the pro-peer opponents love to show this little chart from Tourism Analytics, and it's like, oh, we're at the bottom of the list, and it's like, but you do realize that there's still half of the list is in negative numbers. Right. So when we talk about we're not the only ones in decline, we're not the only ones in decline.
The whole region.
The whole region is. I mean, there are some, like I said, like the 2 to 4 day cruises has increased. So some of the tourism numbers for like Key West is seeing like some of the best numbers that they've ever seen.
But Key West, not Caribbean.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We had to look at things critically, and also the same like graph that they like to show. If you flip it upside down and you go by the pure numbers, not by how much decline we've had since COVID, but pure numbers, we're still number 6 in the region.
Like, so we're still doing all right.
We're still doing really well.
And our what's the stat? The numbers?
Disembarkation rate. I think
we're like 80 percentile. Or like we're at 80%.
So I think that the average for the Caribbean is like 84%, and ours is 86%.
Yeah. So
so we're above average. Same thing with spend. I think again it's probably like 82%, something like that. We're like 84%, like average spend. So we're already doing better than what the average is. Right. And like you think about some of the other jurisdictions that only have tourism and like are focusing heavily on cruise tourism, their like socioeconomic divide is probably like, look at St. Lucia. Like they're not exactly a country that's like thriving like in terms of like for their people. Where's one of the better jurisdictions like in the economic wise, right? Mm. So do we really want to be comparing ourselves to those kinds of numbers?
We are the luxury destination.
We are the luxury destination.
Yeah. And why aren't we catering?
Why aren't we catering to it?
We don't need to be attracting more of the lower end lines. Like it's okay if the lower end lines.
Yeah, and I mean I think personally some of the decline that we've seen since COVID is probably just those particular cruise lines trying to make a pinch at us. You
remember that American lady there? I think she was from New York. She was walking on 7 Mile Beach and she was talking about how trash Cayman was. And then
in the video, the ghetto video?
No, not that one. Okay. Not that one. It was this New York lady, and pretty much everyone in the comments like, "Don't come here if you don't have money, baby." Yeah. So it's kind of like the same premise. Like we've created a product that you're not coming here without, you're not coming here with $200. Yeah. Expecting to make it like the week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's what you need to be spending in a day, probably, if not more. I mean, I spend $200 on groceries.
Exactly. So I think I don't know. I guess maybe cruise tourism could be in line with that. So in terms of the cruise ship industry itself, if the vote is no, I mean it is non-binding, so they could just go whichever way they want. But suppose the vote is no. Has CPR proposed any thoughts around where the future of cruise tourism should head?
Well, I think like what we've already started doing, like trying to focus on these quality cruises is 100% where we need to go. I think, depending on which minister gets in for tourism, I think what they should be doing is reaching out and like finding these ultra luxury ones like the Ritz. They should be reaching out to Richard Branson and finding out how to get like Virgin Voyages down here. And I think just focus on that and focus on. Now, the other thing that I think is really important with this, right, because I think it's been kind of muddied in the waters with this. A vote no to cruise berthing is not a vote no to enhance the facility, right? I've seen tons of people be like, oh, well, why would you want to come here? Look at this. Like, there's no sunshades. There's none of this. There's none of that. That needs to be done. 100% that needs to be done. We need to facilitate so that it's they've got shade the whole way through. We need to figure out ways to make the immigration and customs lines shorter. We could probably even enhance the tender boats, right? Make that a nicer and more enjoyable experience. 5 minute,
My own bias request: get rid of some more jewelry stores. That's my own bias request. Not paid for, or this is nobody else's thoughts but my own.
But I mean, like in terms of like what town could be, I think town has so much potential, and I think if Cardinal Avenue now it's been pedestrianized, I think that would be amazing to have some really nice like restaurants or bistros,
shops,
kind of
sit outside. Eat.
I mean, I know there's probably a grand portion of this year that you don't want to sit outside in the heat. But
listen, tourists be out there cooking in the sun, bro. They don't mind.
You could get some,
they don't mind.
You can get some beautiful sail shades and things like that.
Yeah.
And had they planted nicer, more lush trees instead of these palm trees on Cardinal Avenue, it might have actually been a little bit,
I can't.
But I do think that we could it would be nice to have nicer restaurants and bistros that don't just work for cruise tourism, because there are still businesses like office buildings in or near Georgetown. I work near Georgetown in an office building. I would walk into town to sit outside and go.
You'd like to eat some places?
I'd like to. I mean, right now I have one option.
Jewelry store ever fed you? Yeah. Sorry, I'm just I'm gonna get in so much trouble.
But you know what I mean? Like there are things that can be done, right? Like there are nicer bars, nicer, all of this stuff. And don't just cater to cruise, cater to local tourism too. Cater to people in the local market. And you might be surprised you don't have to shut your shop at 5:00 when the cruise lines are gone.
So I guess the idea is that what does the revitalization of Georgetown in a whole really look like? Because that could enhance how much money is spent in the economy if there are more, places for people to hang out, more places for people, more things for people to do other than just shop.
And like me, on a personal level, I do think that Georgetown probably we need to maybe think about even finding accommodation in Georgetown, make it a little bit more like an actual center. I don't know that it would be hard for me to say that on behalf of CPR, but I do think that there's a lot of things that we could do with Georgetown to make it more bustling, not just 8 to 5 when offices and cruise tourists are.
Yeah, this is the problem, I guess.
Because that was the problem pre-COVID. It shut.
Yeah, definitely.
It shut at 5:00.
That was a wrap.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem with and not like the bad problem, but with Plan Cayman on a whole, is that everyone has their own vision, everyone has their own ideas, and we're always going to disagree on, well, I think we should do this, I think this is the best idea, Georgetown needs to look like this, but
it is really hard, because I do know that there's a lot of people that are not for mixed use infrastructure. So the idea that you might have
retail on the bottom,
restaurants and apartments, and maybe even office buildings. And there's people that are just like, no, keep town as the financial center, and then let's keep residential outside of that, right? So you probably are, but I do think if you want town to stay alive,
you need people in town.
And why are people going to stay in town? Because after 5, you don't want to be near your office. You want to be out of there.
Yeah.
You want to go home. Right?
So, how do people, I guess, are you guys taking on volunteers or people that want to help at all or anything like that?
I mean, at this stage, it's pretty much, we're just kind of a wait and see sort of thing, obviously, please reach out, if you have an idea or things that you would want to do to help us. But, we're a little less than 3 weeks away. Okay. So
if people do want to reach out and ask questions or have a conversation, how do they get in touch with you?
So everything's CPR Cayman. So our website is www.cprcayman.com. LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all CPR Cayman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Email address is cprcayman@gmail.com.
And on CPR Cayman, if they do want to see Miss Marla's presentation that she made, where was that?
That was at the Constitution Hall.
Okay, yeah. If they want to see her presentation on her report that she made, it's about I think 40 minutes into the video, and her presentation is about 35 minutes.
Yeah.
It's very well done. You can go to CPR Cayman on YouTube and see it there.
Yeah, you could also listen to it on Marl Road, because she basically did the same sort of report on Marl Road on the Friday.
Right.
And that one might be, obviously go to CPR as well too, but the one on Marl Road might be a little bit easier to see because she was able to.
Oh, I remember she put up the
She was
slides.
able to put up the slides, so you're probably able to see the slides that she's referring to a little bit easier than you will on ours. But obviously go to ours too, because we did have another environmental expert speak as well too. So he spoke a lot more about like dredging and the dredging that's been done all over the world in terms, like for corals and stuff like that, and what's happened to the marine life. So that's a really good report to listen to as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Miss Lockwood, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Whether you are on your drive to work, from work, or at work, doing work, or not doing work, we appreciate you listening and tuning in to the LinkUp podcast. My name is Chris. Until next time.